everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is just a brief announcement before we start the meeting for any members of the public who are here with us today. Just a quick review on how to make an oral public comment. On your side panel, there will be a little raised hand. So you can click on that and it'll show a raise or lower your hand icon in the control panel. One of the organizers, which is myself, or any of the organizers, will notify you when it's your turn to speak. And you'll have 2 minutes to speak. And it'll have this little timer pop up on the screen. Once your 2 minutes are up, you'll see it moving like this. Once they're up, you'll be notified and it'll show this screen that no time is remaining. All right, thank you so much. All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Maria. I'd like to start this meeting, so we'll have a call to order and we'll do a roll call. I will call the board members' names in alphabetical order. If you have a camera, please turn it on briefly when I call your name. Jeff Hornbuckle.
I am here.
Great. Nick Kuntz.
I am also here.
James Langhorn. John Maloney.
Here.
Jim Marston.
Here.
And Paul Spieler, here. We will now open public comment for anyone wishing to speak about items not on this agenda. Please note, due to time constraints, each person may be limited to 2 minutes. Do we have anyone that wishes to make a public comment?
Chair Spieler, we do have a member of the public who has joined us. Just as a quick reminder, if you would like to speak, click the raise hand function in your control panel. I'll call on you to speak and you'll have 2 minutes. And I do not see anyone has indicated that they would like to make public comment. Thank you, Chair Spieler.
Okay, thank you, Greta. We will now close public comment and move to the first subject item. First subject item is approval of the minutes for the Building and Fire Code Board of Appeals meeting of February 4th, 2021. Are there any comments from the board? Please unmute yourself and use a camera if you have one. If you don't have a camera, please announce your name before speaking. Are there any comments from the board? All right, there are no comments from the board. We will need a motion from the board to approve the minutes. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. John Maloney makes a motion. Do we have a second on the motion? All right, I, Paul Spieler, will make a second on the motion. Call to vote on the February 4th, 2021 minutes. We will use roll call for the vote. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Jeff Hornbuckle.
Aye.
Nick Kuntz.
Aye.
John Maloney.
Aye.
Jim Marston.
Aye.
And Paul Spieler. Aye. The motion carries. Are there any announcements from the board or staff? Please remember to turn on your camera if you need to speak or state your name if you aren't using a camera.
Mr. Chair.
All right. Yeah, the chair would like to recognize Jose Barajas.
Thank you, Mr.
Do we
Chair.
have, okay. Do we have the necessary number of board members for these hearing items?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do have enough members for a quorum. This is you're gonna be hearing some accessibility, ratification as well as appeals. We do have the 2 members representing the disability community and then the balance in order to have a quorum. A second announcement I would like to make is I want to make everybody aware of a typo in the report. This is on page 2 of the report, paragraph 4. It referenced exhibits 2 through 3. This should only reference Exhibit 5. And last, we'd like to just update the board. Staff is still working currently on the construction valuation, and that is going to be coming to the board at a later meeting. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Barajas. Are there any other announcements from the board or staff?
I have a question regarding that last announcement. If we don't have complete construction evaluation, or valuation, I should say, how can we come to a conclusion on this? I think that construction evaluation is extremely pertinent to the matter at hand today, and I couldn't be doing anything but upholding the building officials' recommendation to not to provide a hardship without more information about financials.
Thank you, Board Member Coons. To be clear, the update is on the research the board asked staff to
Got it.
do.
Understood. Another agenda item. It's not this agenda items construction evaluation.
Correct.
Got it. Understood.
This is Jim Marston, Jose. I just have a question on your change on page 2. I'm having a hard time seeing that. So could you just tell us roughly what that change is doing? What are you taking out?
Yes, Maria, can we put the staff report real quick? And navigate to page 2. And scroll down to paragraph 4. Yes, that's good. So if you notice at the end of paragraph 4, right above nature of accessibility, which would be gain or lost, it references exhibits -2 and 3. That should reference exhibit 5. And that is where you get the number of 125,743.
Okay, thank you. By the way, my PDF is not labeled at all, so it's hard to find when you see paragraph 4. Do you have numbers on your end?
We don't have each paragraph labeled. We just counted the number. So there's no labels on the paragraph.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Chair Spieler.
Yes, Jeff.
I just wanted to disclose, I had a telephone conversation with the applicant last week, I believe it was. We did not discuss the project specifically or at all. It was only in regards to the format of the meeting. I just wanted to let everyone know. And I'm sorry, it was with Steve Walton from the applicant team. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff. All right, that brings us to our first subject item, which is number 4A, 2130 Mission Ridge Road, ratification of hardship. The description is for an accessible route, swing set, and playground. The chair recognizes staff member Christy Foreman for presentation. Christy, could you turn on your mic, please?
Sorry. Now can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we had a meeting to discuss this hardship, and during the discussion, it was discovered that the path of travel from the hard courts over to the swing set is actually an accessible route. So that path of travel is provided, so therefore a hardship is not necessary.
Okay. Thank you, Christy. Is that, and that's it?
Yeah, pretty much it.
Okay, great. So now, Chair would like to recognize the applicant, Steve Walton, to present their request for ratification of a hardship.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I believe for this item, there isn't a hardship, so we don't have a presentation for this element of the agenda. So we are ready for the next item, however.
Okay. Do we have anyone that wishes from the public that wishes to comment on this item? If you do wish to speak, you have 2 minutes to do so.
Chair Spieler, no one has used the raised hand icon to indicate that they would like to speak. So it does not look like we have any public comment at this time. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to ask a question. I have a comment. Since this is not a hardship, is this item to be, there's really nothing to decide on this item, is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Jose here. We just wanted to bring it to the attention of the board members that in fact there was a compliant path, and if open it to the board members if anybody had any kind of questions on how that was determined, or just any type of questions on how we came to an agreement that in fact there was an accessible path to travel, and that is really the ratification of the agreement we're looking from the board.
So, okay, so we're going to have a motion to ratify the ratification of a hardship. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
This is Nick.
All right.
Are we?
Let's comment first. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak or address the board on this item? Okay, we'll now close to public comment. Are there any questions from the board to the staff or applicants? Please be sure to use your camera when speaking.
Yeah, this is Nick Kuntz. I have a question for staff. If no hardship is required, why are we voting on one? Why are we voting to ratify a hardship that's not required? Seems highly unusual.
Chair Coons, I can maybe take that. You know, we shouldn't. The only thing that should be ratified is a determination by the building official, and so that's what should be ratified. So when the building official determines the application of accessibility creates a reasonable hardship, that's when the building official's determination must be either reviewed and approved by the board for the basis of granting the hardship. So there really is no action to do that. Nor probably should be, nor should probably be.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we should just move on to the next item. There's no action here.
There is no action here. Correct.
Thank you for clarifying that, John. Appreciate it. And thank you for bringing it up, Member Kuntz.
All right, yes, thank you, John. All right, we're going to move on to the next item, which is subject number 4B, 2130 Mission Ridge Road, appeal of a decision. And the description is path of travel exemption from the public right-of-way. The chair recognizes Interim Secretary of Board, Jose Barajas, for presentation of the appeal.
Chair, before Mr. Barajas starts, I believe it was board member Hornbuckle. I could be wrong. We talked about ex parte contact. Speaking, could that commissioner come back on? Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Just for your protection, to clarify the record, when you said process, can you just quickly elaborate on the record what that meant? So you didn't discuss the merits of the appeal?
Yes, no, it was in terms of how the meeting is run. If there's typically an applicant presentation, or if it's only the building official that presents exactly how it works. That was the extent of it. We didn't discuss the project.
Okay, I just wanted to make that. I wanted to get that on the record for
sure,
you.
yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you. Proceed. Thank you.
Okay, it's Jose Barajas for presentation of the appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representatives from the Marymon School have made a request for consideration of unreasonable hardship and seeking relief from path of travel obligations required by the California Building Code, specifically Section 11B-204.2. The original scope of work for this permit, which was BLD 2017-01355, was to remodel and repair the existing Marymon School playfield. The work included regrading of the playfield to smooth out some eroded and even surfaces, and improvements to access stairs, a new ramp, and tourist seating. There was also new gates at the Mission Road boundary wall and new colored concrete sidewalk to replace the broken sidewalk from Mission Ridge Road to the front entry steps of the campus and administration. Because the construction valuation was more than $156,162, which is the threshold set in 2017, the time of the permit was applied for, the California State Building Code required full compliance with the path to travel requirements, provided that this did not create an unreasonable hardship. And item B, if you go to page 2 of the, page 3 of the report, our recommendations after careful review of the documentation that was provided by the applicant, the city building official recommends denial of the ratification of the building owner's request for the path to travel hardship exemption from the public sidewalk to the excessive path to travel on the northern side of the existing hard courts. This is labeled as point B on sheet D1, which is exhibit 1 that has been attached to the report of the original and revised sheets. The basis of denial are as follows. Item A, the path to travel compliance was part of the original scope of work and construction. And you can see this if you go to page 2 of this report and specifically look at item 6 on the table where the values of construction have been broken down. Item B, the construction cost increase for the existing restroom improvements and path to travel for Mission Ridge Road have not been adequately justified. Item C, it's not clear on how the project's construction budget increased on completion. And item D, the support documentation has not been provided to justify construction valuation reduction by $125,743. Please note the original cost of construction was stated at $616,799. And this is shown on sheet D1, which is exhibit 1 of the attached report. And therefore, the request from a reasonable hardship is denied since it does state that the cost of construction is $491. We have attached for your reference the receipts that were provided by the applicant and trying to provide the justification for those numbers. We have compiled this in Exhibit 10 for your reference as single line items in an effort to try to make it a little bit more easier to digest the information and transparent. With that, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Welton, who represents the Marymon School, and Christy Foreman and myself are available to answer any technical questions that might arise. Thank you.
Let's see. Hopefully they're able to see my screen.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Steve Welton. I'm a trustee for Marymount of Santa Barbara. I'm also a principal at Suzanne Elledge Planning and Permitting Services. With me today is the project architect, Sam Nafis, our certified access specialist that's consulting for us through stepping through accessibility, Janice Kent, the headmaster of Marymount of Santa Barbara, Christina Broderick, and the director of operations, Linda Price. However, the bulk of the presentation will be by me. So you've heard from Jose, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the project to give you some. As mentioned, the lower school at Marymount was in extremely poor shape at the time the request was begun, rutted, muddy, really unusable for athletics or academic events. So the school fundraised to install a new playfield, went through design review approval, obtained a building permit, and underwent construction. Inspection, the inspector measured the sidewalk slopes, identified the path of travel from Mission Ridge should not meet code and would require further improvements. That is not something that we anticipated, despite what was said earlier. At least I didn't anticipate it. And so that cost was not included in our scope or estimated costs for the project. For visual, this is the school, the lower part of Marymount. The area in green here is the field that's just shown as it has been renovated subsequently. Importantly, as part of the conditional use permit, both the lower field and this athletic court here are required to provide overflow parking for events. This is the parking lot that we'll be discussing later, and this is the path of travel, which I'll get into in a moment. I thought just walking through the path of travel and the improvements that have been made as part of the project. Again, this is the lower field area. We starting from the west, this side and moving up to the right. We installed 2 ADA spaces, path of travel here, concrete work on this curb to provide access up to this level, repaving and leveling of the athletic court where there was some unevenness to a new spot here where a new ramp was constructed with railings. Path of travel from there to a second ramp. Marymount is on a very steep campus, as you may know, and so there are varying levels along the campus. So this takes us up to another level up here to this next to the tennis courts, and then a path of travel from there was taken across to the lower school, nurse's office, and then eventually to a bathroom that was renovated. The existing administration building was renovated to add an ADA bathroom. So just showing a few pictures of that. These are the 2 spaces that are out of the path here. This is the curbing that was added, looking at from the other direction towards the school. This shows the gates that were added that provide access for vehicles to do overflow parking. We'll come back to that in a moment. You can see the ramp in the background here that I'm going to go to. Pardon me, wrong direction. This is the ramp that gets from the sport court up here, the iron railings. This is looking, there's that same ramp here. Now I'm going to bring you across the path of travel to the second ramp, which leads up here. This is looking down that ramp. And then again, from there, it was basic standard ADA improvements to this picture. The path of travel was leveled to this point where the bathroom was put in. So the area of interest is from Mission Ridge sidewalk here, a path of travel to this point. This is a view of that from Mission Ridge looking up the street and then looking down. Again, this is a ramp here that's required to bring vehicles on for part of our CUP to provide overflow parking. So it is non-trivial to bring this sidewalk up to ADA standards. And so our request is that the board approve a revision to remove the path of travel upgrade from Mission Ridge to the play fields. One of the reasons the path of travel leads to a relatively short stretch of sidewalk on Mission Ridge that is unconnected to the community abroad. And the city has not provided any accessible spaces along the sidewalk at this location. This is a visual of that. This is the sidewalk. It's about 360 feet from end to end. There's a red curbing on either side, and there's a fire hydrant in the middle. So overall, it's about 300 feet, a little bit less of available area, or about 15 parking spaces if you're thinking of it that way. There's no sidewalk on Mission Ridge anywhere on either side here. There's no sidewalk on the south part of Mission Ridge. There's no sidewalk on Ridge Lane, no sidewalk in Tremonto, none on Las Tunas, and none on this part of Mission Ridge. It's just an island of sidewalk, and it's unlikely in the near future or perhaps ever to have sidewalk connecting to other major parts of the community. There's no commercial areas around here either. So to address the ADA parking shortage in lieu of the path of travel, the school has provided an additional ADA space. Remember, there's 2 up there on a 15-space parking lot. And it's parking, which is a shorter, obviously, an easier way of accessing the field and school than the path from Mission Ridge. The additional ramp I mentioned would lead to the southwest corner, I'll come to this in a second, again, of the sports court, which is used for overflow parking events. And that potentially creates a conflict between people using the ramp and cars. Therefore, providing the path of travel via the ADA spaces is safer and more practical. Again, this is looking at that same plan. If we were to do a ramp, it would do something like this to this corner here. The school has made significant ADA improvements, including 2 ramps, bathroom, the path of travel improvements curve, paving and leveling. The requested path of travel links to a sidewalk that, as I mentioned, that is an island. It's unconnected to the surrounding community. And the 2 ADA parking spaces provided direct access to the path of travel from the parking lot and an easier, safer, and more cost-effective way of connecting. At this point, I want to bring in Janice. If you could unmute Janice and just address this point for me. I can't hear you.
Ah, can you hear me now? Sounds like you can. One of the issues when I look at a project, and I've been working with the school on this, about putting in a path of travel to the area that is altered to the public right of way. This is always required. There are some exceptions, and one of the tests that I use and is generally accepted is, are there pedestrians? And when you look at the definition, you're looking for, is there sidewalks? 1, is there bus stops? 2. Well, we don't have any bus stops there. It's a residential neighborhood. And we do have 1 sidewalk. It doesn't interconnect with anything, but it is long enough to connect to about 15 parking spaces. And that's, with a presumption of a 20-foot long parking space, which is standard. There is another aspect under the ADA as well as under the CBC. And what that is equivalent facilitation. And what it says is nothing in these requirements prevents the use of designs, products, or technologies as alternates to those prescribed, provided they result in substantially equivalent or, and this is the part I always look for, or greater accessibility and usability. So with it in mind that along the street on this 1 portion of sidewalk, we can put in 15 cars. It means that we can put in 1, well, we can't put in, but the city could put in 1 accessible space. At this point, there aren't any. So rather than spending an extraordinary amount more money to make a path of travel to these 15 spaces, what we're doing is we're putting in an extra accessible parking space at the top of the hill there, directly across from the new path of travel. So this is providing, in my opinion, greater accessibility. We're allowing people to park closer to the path of travel rather than all the way down the hill, parking on the street and having to go that distance. They'll be much closer to the path of travel. And in my opinion, this is providing greater access. And it would be under equivalent facilitation. And because this is a residential neighborhood, I don't see this like a commercial neighborhood where you want to interconnect a public sidewalk with, other stores and other retail. You have what you have there, which is a sidewalk across one side of the street, a partial side of the street. So I think moving an accessible space, providing it on the property closer to the pedestrian entrance actually provides more access. And that's how I would summarize it.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Janice. Lastly, I want to invite Chris Roderick, the headmaster for the Marymount of Santa Barbara head of school, to speak to this last slide.
Good afternoon. I welcome, thank you for welcoming us to this meeting, and I appreciate you allowing us to speak on behalf of the community. Obviously, we're also in a very interesting time as we had, this project began as I was starting at Marymount in the summer of 2018. We had no signs or symptoms at the time that we would be entering a global pandemic and therefore be adding an exorbitant amount of costs to our annual budget to make sure that we could be open for our students. The project itself, as was mentioned earlier, did already exceed what the fundraising was done, and we have not done additional fundraising since we've been in the pandemic over the last year. So at this time, our additional costs to keep the school open safely and to meet all of the regulations of our COVID regulations at this time has been in excess of $400,000. And that is in conjunction with why we have applied for this summary at this time. So happy to answer any other questions. I'm not sure if I have more to add than that, Steve, unless you can think of something that I'm not remembering at this time.
I thank you very much. That pretty much concludes our presentation. I did want to add that the chair of the Board of Trustees, Alexis Weaver, is in the audience as well, and that we would like an opportunity, if possible, to respond to any public comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So before we take questions from the board, I'd like to, the chair would like to entertain comments from the public by opening public comment. So we will now open public comment, and due to time constraints, each person may be limited to 2 minutes. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to address the board on this item?
Thank you, Chair Spieler. And as a quick reminder, if you would like to make a public comment, please click the hand icon. I will unmute you. You can speak for 2 minutes, and then we will close out public comment. And I do not see anyone indicating they would like to speak, Chair Spieler, so thank you.
All right, thank you, Greta. We will now close public comment. Are there any questions from the board or staff or applicants? Please make sure to use your camera when speaking.
This is Jim Marston. I have a few comments to make. In regards to Ms. Kent's CAS report, I appreciate it, but to tell us that 2 spaces instead of 1 in the parking lot is better than having 15 available places for people to use in case they need it, you're kind of saying that only 2 people who need wheelchair access are going to come there at any one time. So I think that's, it sounded good, but I don't think that that's going to be in reality. As far as Mr. Welton's comment, if you look at the plans from the 2017, you'll see specifically that it shows that sidewalk being fixed. If you look at the CAS report prepared by Chris Hansen, he also shows that sidewalk there. And then if you look at the access compliance form on sheet 1, you'll see that Sam actually checked the box that said that that's part of the improvements. So I'm very shocked to see that people are saying, both Mr. Welton and Sam, that they were surprised to hear that that sidewalk had to be fixed. It's already been in the plans and shown in 2 different places that I just mentioned. The worst thing I see here is kind of sloppy work as far as what exactly we're talking about. In Janice's report and in Christine's report, they talk about the sidewalk from Mission Ridge to the swing set area. That's not the area in question here. In the estimate from the landscape guy, he talks about going all the way to the faculty steps at the far end of that driveway. I think, but the real thing that the plans show is just from Mission Ridge, 120 feet up to that where the tactile domes is and that ramp is into the park, into the play area, okay? Not all the way through to those stairs. So that estimate that you're looking at and thinking you can't afford, I think is totally erroneous. No plans were given to us showing what he based his estimate on. But if you look at 120 feet, asphalt removal of the 3.5-foot path, new pavers for 4 feet, you're looking at $20 or $30 a square foot, which at the most $20,000 or $30,000 to fix that sidewalk. Not the $209,000 that we're told it's going to cost you to fix that. So I would like somebody to explain to us why we're told that you need a hardship for $209,000, which I agree is high, but it shouldn't cost more than $30,000. So please convince me that somehow that estimate that you're using is valid. Otherwise, it should be like $30 a square foot at $30,000. So that's my comment for right now, are my questions.
Mr. Marston, if I can respond to one part of that. There's a whole discussion about how many parking spaces is enough for accessible parking spaces. There is the thought that 1 out of the first 25 is not enough. If you have restaurants, if you have retail, you should really provide more. There is some thought that if you have just office buildings, 1 out of 25 is too much. The parking on the street at 20 linear feet would be 15 spaces. And that's what you would use for parallel parking. You are required to have 1 accessible parking spot for every 25, for the first 25 spaces. So whether we, agree that that is enough in terms of usability, in terms of code requirements, it would require a minimum of 1. And then with what we have on site there, we're also required to have a minimum of 1 because it is under 25. So that's what I wanted to respond to, just in terms of numbers. And then Steve, I guess, if you want to respond to the rest, unless you want me to.
May I quickly thank Ms. Kent for that? But we're not talking about putting an accessible spot on the street. We're just talking about an access route. No one's asked for a parking spot on the street. You're totally correct on only 1's required. You put in 2. That's good. But we're not talking about any new accessible spots, just the sidewalk access.
Yeah, if we could just have a second to respond to all of your questions, and then perhaps we'll see if you still have concerns. Just as a reminder, the basketball courts also serve as overflow parking. They're on grade, essentially, of the ADA level. So those would be available as well for parking in the event that there's a significant event that requires more people to park. And in regards to your third question, I think Sam Mathis is probably the best person to discuss this. And Sam, if you could unmute and turn on your video. But the issue you just raised about widening the sidewalk, the concern there is, as I mentioned in my presentation, a driveway that provides access as required by our CUP to get onto those basketball courts. And Sam, I'll let you take it from here this year on.
Yeah, so thank you, Steve, and thank you, board. The actual path from Mission Ridge to the entrance at the top of the hardcourt play area, we looked at early on and did some assumptions that it was accessible and we wouldn't need to do very much, if anything, to potentially repave it. But in actuality, the slope is greater than 5% in the top section of that. Plus, it has cross slopes that exceed all of the tolerance for ADA for the ramping that allows the cars to get up into the overflow parking. That's part of this CDP approval and conditions on the school. So to correct those, we would have to correct the curb and pull the curb out into the actual access drive, which is a drop-off drive that is prime drop-off for all the children during the school pickup and drop-off morning. So that extensive paving and repaving and curb work is what added up to the larger amount. And then as we looked at trying to correct all those cross slopes and the exceedance of 5% through those drive areas, we also looked at an alternate, which was a switchback ramping system that would go up the slope at the southwest corner of the hardcourt. And that ramp system would allow us to not change all of the drive aisles and the curbs and shrink the parking drop-off area, and would allow the path of travel to go up that slope. That 200,000 is actually because we looked at that ramp as less problematic for the school to actually do, and that cost of that ramp was the 200,000. So the ramp, the walls, going up the slope 4 to 5 feet to get up to that southwest corner of the hardcourt to allow a path of travel to connect from the street is what translates to the larger number that you're looking at. Also, the correction of the cross slopes was something that was a sacrifice to the drop off and the backup for all the parking areas, and we determined that that was not a very good solution as well. So that's the explanation for the larger dollar amounts versus just the $20 to $30 a square foot for repaving that, as we found out at the end of the project, was not a viable solution for the ADA requirements, and we had to go into a more extensive repair and design mode to analyze that whole area for a correct solution. So I hope that gives you a little more content on exactly why and what happened in that corner and what is the reason why we're here for the hardship on that path connection.
Well, thank you, but I'm still curious why both of you tell me you were surprised to see that this was included in the plans when it's been there all the way
Well,
through.
I think initially we thought that the path was okay. It was not that steep. It was paved with asphalt. We didn't assume we'd have to do much of anything to it. If that was an oversight by our team, we own that. But at this point, the actual reality of those improvements per code and ADA requirements is much more than that. And we didn't know that in the beginning.
Okay, let me ask this from Jose and Christy. Do you have a problem if they just put the new sidewalk in and forget about this problem with the cross slope, because this is not a ramp, this is just a sidewalk that you're repaving? Is there a problem from Jose and Christy to just pave that asphalt area without any big work at the entrance?
Maria, can you put up the site plan for that area? And I'm going to defer to Christy on the technical part for that question. And that should be on exhibit 1 or 2, Maria. And we can see them on the lower left-hand side.
For a condition you can change.
Thank you. So if I understood your question correctly, Board Member Morrison, is where the bend of the sidewalk and meets the sidewalk going into the school, is that section where you're proposing to add some paving?
Yeah, from Mission Ridge up to the entrance into the playground. And there's some gates there, so you have plenty of room to just turn right as you go up the sidewalk, turn right into the hard court. And I don't see why that isn't okay to do for a small amount of money.
Christy, do you see that being a viable option?
I didn't understand. I'm sorry. I was trying to get my mute off.
Okay.
You're wanting to come, you need to come in from the street all the way up, and that's the path that they cannot provide.
I think we can pave that different with new material, concrete or asphalt, but there's too many cross slopes and it's too steep in the center section, which made us have to look for an alternate solution. There's cross slopes towards the parking lot that allow cars to drive up into the parking area that's the overflow. And also about 2/3 of that area are exceeding 5%. So we'd have to go into railings and or change the drive and come out with the curb into the western part of the access road of the driveway parking area. So if we could just repave that, that would be a much easier solution, but it doesn't meet all the ADA stipulations.
Maria, could you bring
so,
that screenshot number, the screenshot that was provided by Nick, I believe, screenshot labeled 2021-0303? That'll help us visualize that corner. Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Another alternative would be to provide a ramp from the sidewalk up to the level of the play court, the basketball court, which would give you access to those ramps to get you to the next level of the school.
That is our
For my explanation, Christy, that ramp was the thing that caused us to go into more expense and therefore asking for this hardship because of that. Does that
So
make sense?
to answer your question, Board Member Morrison, it appears that it would be just as much work to put that ramp or that walkway up to those courts, and the cost may potentially be high for them. That would be for up to Steve and Sam to project potentially on the cost.
But I thought his question though was whether we could just do sidewalk up there without regard to the cross slopes, in which case our answer is yes, but I don't know if it's legal from your perspective.
We could widen that area, push it into those agave plants that are in the screen picture, and we could repave that. And it would be something that would be more easily accessible, but it does not meet all the ADA requirements as you get up towards the top section with the cross slopes and the pitch. It does exceed the tolerances, and that's where we got into having to look for an alternate solution. And it made us do a scissor back cross ramp coming up to the bottom southwest corner of the hard court. And that solution was the one that is the costly one that you've looked at the estimates for. The engineering was looked at by Mike Gones, who was our engineer on this project, our civil engineer. And by building retaining walls and ramps and railings, that cost was, again, something that put the school into a very tough position.
This is board member Nick Kuntz, and I'm just curious to quantify, first of all, to clarify, the cross slope could be addressed up to the point of the vehicle entry ramp with some very minor grading along with the widening of the sidewalk. It's not till we get to the vehicle ramp that you get a cross slope problem, correct?
Well, board member Kuntz, it's just below that it starts to exceed the 6%. So I would say if you look at that ramp in the shadow up there, probably 20 to 30 feet below that is where we get into an exceedance of the 5%. So all that area needed to be reworked. The curb needed to be torn out. The drive access needed to be pushed into to allow for those grades and warps to happen. We could push the sidewalk that's there now, the asphalt, into the soil to the right and make that wide enough and get to that pinch point. But at that pinch point, there was complicated cross slopes and other percentages that caused us to reject or have to leave that solution and go to another alternate. And that's what we've been discussing.
But with demolition of the existing asphalt and regrading of that last area, you could eliminate the cross slope without getting rid of the curb. You can widen it to the 4 feet. It may be valid that it exceeds the 5% slope, but and that's another issue. But the cross slope, I don't think is an issue until you get to the driveway, and even then, I'm not sure. I'd like to see some calculations to quantify this, to verify this. I don't see this in any of the plan sets provided.
Well, no, we haven't drawn that solution other than schematically with Mike Gones, our civil engineer. So we haven't put together a working.
So what looks like a very viable repaving of 100 and something feet, little landscaping. It's funny to me what we're presented with for consideration of the cost estimate is a $209,000 estimate with no accompanying plans, and told this is a financial hardship. But when I look at this, all I see is a little bit of a repaving. And the funny thing about the Allen Construction budget estimate is, it gives us no context of what the scope of work is, but it tells us what it isn't, and it doesn't include landscaping or paving, which to my way of thinking is all that's needed here. So I'm really struggling with this representation by the applicant.
You say Allen Construction, so I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Sorry, Anderson Construction, Exhibit 8.
Okay.
Okay, this is Chair Wheeler. I'd like to make a comment. So it seems to me that these slopes, the cross slope and everything, they're close, but they're not quite there. Like we've got maybe 6% instead of the 5% required. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair Spieler. They exceed in about a third of that walkway connection, the 5%, and it's a variation of between 6 and 7%. And it's all the cross slopes for the ramping. And it's the width as it gets close to that railing driveway gate that starts to be narrower than 4 feet.
Okay, so I'm wondering if we could propose a solution here where we maybe don't have a accessible ramp or accessible path that complies with 100% of the slopes, but gets close to it. We widen it 4 feet, and then we're improving that we're improving it definitely as an accessible route, although it doesn't meet all the requirements. And then you're giving us an extra parking space. So it seems like we can maybe do as much as possible on that pathway without getting into that upper, the ramping, which is going to increase the cost by designing that ramp. And then we get the extra parking spot, which to me seems a lot more desirable than having to park way down at the street at Mission Ridge Road and then have that route all the way up to, that longer accessible route path. So, I'm just throwing it out there. Why don't we do what we can to the accessible path from Mission Ridge Road, and then the equivalent facilitation, because we didn't meet all those cross slope percentages, would be the extra parking space.
Chair Spieler, this is Nick Kuntz. I'll have to defer to council on this, but I don't think that we as a board are able to provide any sort of exemption for the California Building Code in this format. I would like to suggest that if the cost of redoing this sidewalk from the public right of way to point B on the site plan is in fact prohibitively expensive and more expensive than the proposed ramping solution, I'd like to see an estimate to support that claim.
What if I can say
okay,
one
Chair
thing?
Spieler, one more time. Nick, I think we can make modifications. I mean, that's what we're here as a board, as part of the hardship. We could allow a modification and as an equivalent facilitation, I think we would be allowed to do that.
If I could say one thing, in terms of ADA, we could take, and you know what, Steve, can you go to the photograph and go to the one that's looking downhill? I think that would help a little bit.
Ms. Kent, I'm sorry, but I'm struggling with California Building Code, not ADA.
Well, we can't modify something that also doesn't comply with ADA. So I think of both of them, unfortunately. My brain kind of gets bifurcated there. But if we are making accessible path of travel to a certain point, and that's a great idea, but if it ends, if it doesn't connect to anything that's accessible, then what's going to happen is we're going to need a level landing there to do a turnaround to go back down. Otherwise, we've now just created a danger. And this photograph shows that route in a different way, and it's looking down the hill. So I was originally thinking if we could go up on the asphalt and before the driveway, turn in this direction now, it would be turning left, the new pedestrian gate in that area to get onto the court. I think we're still going to have too much slope in that turn to get there unless we make that whole walkway into a ramp and can get the slope up there. That might be an alternative, but again, I don't know what the costs are. I'm not a cost person. But we can't just do a portion, because what I would have to do under ADA and under CBC is I would have to put a sign at the bottom of that route saying where the accessible route is or how to get on there, because that's not accessible. It would actually be dangerous.
I have a question for the applicant team and possibly Mr. Barajas. I know there's an exception in the building code for site arrival points. And I just looked it up quickly. It says at least one accessible route shall be provided within the site from accessible parking spaces and accessible passenger drop-off and loading zones, public streets and sidewalks, and public transportation stops to the accessible building or facility entrance they serve. And there's an exception, number 2. An accessible route shall not be required between site arrival points and the building or facility entrance if the only means of access between them is a vehicular way not providing pedestrian access. So was there any consideration given to that exception of the code? That, I mean, I can see that there's, you know, I guess what you would call a pedestrian path, but that sidewalk, as Mr. Welton showed in that previous exhibit, the sidewalk doesn't connect to anything. So there really isn't I would think there is no pedestrian connection. Was there any consideration given to that?
I did not consider that portion. I don't know if Chrissy did during her review. I had seen that exception used before. In the context that that exception was used, we had a point of arrival at a job site, and everybody, able-bodied, disabled-body, all showed up at that point of arrival. And then they took a separate, in this case, there were some ATVs in order to get to the actual place of work. So we have a distinct separate point of arrival, and the only way to get to the other area of work was not through a vehicular way. That's the way I've seen that exception used before. In this case, the requirement is to provide an accessible path to travel to the public way. There is a sidewalk that gets used by the parents or whoever attends the school as a drop-off area or parking area. So I don't see.
I'm sorry. So people are walking from the street up that pathway to drop off?
Yes, it does happen. Michael, that does occur.
Understood.
This is Nick Kuntz, and I can share my experience. I went to the site over the weekend to get eyes on the ground, and I parked along Mission Ridge, along that sidewalk frontage, and my wheelchair accessible minivan was very accessible from that sidewalk.
Okay.
And I was able to use every one of the 15 or 16 spaces along there.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Mr.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I would like to go back to, I believe is, it might have been you, Mr. Chair, that brought up about getting something close to meeting compliance, but not quite meeting compliance.
Yeah.
We cannot support something that does not meet code. You could suggest, if you like, to the board to grant a hardship based on what it is, a financial hardship, but we could not relax the requirements of the code.
Jose,
All right.
this is Jim Marston. What about, as the chair said, equivalent facilitation? Can't you just do something that's not completely up to code if that extra parking spot qualifies for the equivalent facilitation? Is that not true?
If the board suggests that, we would definitely take into consideration. Nothing comes to mind that would prohibit that. Christy, can you think of something that would prevent us from approving as equal facilitation? And Board Member Morrison, this may require a little bit of research on our end, so we may not be able to give you an answer right away.
Okay.
But it's something we can definitely take into consideration.
Under ADA, and I hate to bring this up again, under ADA, if we're talking about barrier removal, we are allowed to do something which isn't 100% accessible. California, though, generally, if you're doing anything where we're talking a building permit, it should be 100% accessible, but under ADA, it doesn't. But nonetheless, whatever way you go, you would still need to put a sign at the bottom saying this, and at the top, this is not an accessible route.
That's still better, I think, than not having this thing at all usable. Remember, these were in the plans originally. You guys knew about it or should have known about it. And I just don't know why we can't just repave that sidewalk. And maybe you could come back in a month with a couple estimates with some drawings showing what you can do for the least amount of money to get that sidewalk in and get you up to that area. Right now, as we said, we have no real drawings of what this estimate detailed. And I will say in the estimate, there's a price in there for stairs, which I have no idea why we'd put stairs in. So I don't know if Sam can answer that, but your estimate had some things about stairs and tree removals and all this stuff, and I don't know where that is. Can you address that?
Well, there would be hedge removal, landscape removal. There is not a tree for that ramp direct area of the southwest corner. Certainly repaving and making that path of travel better than it is. But once we get up into that critical area that we've discussed before, we will not be able to meet the ADA specific code elements. If you can allow that as a board, we certainly would entertain and look at that. We can come back with estimates that show that.
This is Nick Kuntz. I have a quick question here about the vehicle ramp to the hard court. That does not appear to have been part of the original scope of work of this building permit. That was an alteration. Is that correct?
I think it was there before, Board Member Kuntz, as a ramp. When we did the new asphalt, for those 2 parking spaces, it might have been, improved somewhat, but it had always been there. That's a vehicle gate that rolls and opens for.
As it goes perpendicular to the pedestrian path. That I don't believe that there's any California building code that limits a vehicle path of travel from having
what you're saying.
A cross slope. So to be clear, it would involve redoing that vehicle entry ramp. But I'd like to see.
So are you wanting to have truncated domes on either side of the vehicular path that goes into the play courts?
Yes.
So you're having a curb ramp on each side of that? Is that what you're asking?
Oh, no. Sorry. If we were coming at this design from the point of we needed to bring a vehicle path across this pedestrian path, and the pedestrian path had no cross slope. The vehicle could go across the pedestrian path without it wouldn't matter for the vehicle if it were on a cross slope perpendicular to the pedestrian path. That's my question.
I guess the other thing, Nick, would be, would that give them enough to make the rest of the pedestrian access ramp compliant?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know, and I don't have enough detail here on any of the plan sets, the 3 plan sets that we've been provided. None of those give the detail of that approach, and I think that should have been included in this report, as along with an estimate for, to me, like a repaving project.
We wish it was that simple. I really think that 6% in that last third is what causes all these problems to be moot in terms of the cross slopes, because we just can't achieve it. Because of that, we turned to an alternate solution, which was a correct ramp coming up the southwest corner, which did allow the ADA specifications to be matched.
And this is Jim Marston. I want to ask Ms. Kent a question. Thinking of San Francisco, where I do a lot of work, they have many sidewalks that are steeper than 5%. So if this is just a sidewalk, not a ramp, not an accessible path, but just a sidewalk, then that 6% is not a valid point. Is that correct?
The difference is, in my opinion, is that those sidewalks in San Francisco are on the public right of way. This is not on the public right of way, so I would not necessarily call this a sidewalk. This is a walkway. And so you don't have the exceptions for a walkway.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
Just to see if anyone else agrees, but what I like to see is this thing paved and you guys come back. And remember, since you're short on money, there's no rush to get this sidewalk in or not, right? There's no reason to not postpone for a month. Come back with 3 estimates and some drawings showing the best way to get that sidewalk done and accessible and agreeable with the code. Could we just think that if that would be something we could ask for, just in a month, come back with trying to get this thing, the sidewalk built with the proper grading and see what we can do?
Well, Nick, this is Chair Spieler here. Nick, they're saying if they do that, they're going to have to put in a ramp to get that to work. Because the slope is the slope.
That's
you know,
correct.
So it's in order to take care of that, we need to have more path of travel, which would require a ramp. A longer path of travel, excuse me.
But again, this was in the original plan, so I don't know why we're saying, oh, they didn't see it in time, so now we're supposed to give the hardship.
I have a question, I think for Mr. Barajas regarding the reasoning for the denial of the hardship. So from what I understand, because they showed this path in the scope of work to begin with, as part of the original construction cost, now they're saying it's going to cost more. Is that the reason for its denial? I'm not quite clear on that. I'm not understanding that correctly.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Hornbuckle. So the code does require that you provide a path of travel to the right of way if there is a sidewalk. In this case, there is a sidewalk. The original approved plans accounted for that to be provided. And the cost of construction included that element to be provided. So the basis of denial really is we were not able to really look at the numbers in a clear way to say, you know, this is really what it's going to cost you, $109,000. So we needed some more detail on that. Also, we didn't have a lot of information as regards to elevations and what options were going to lead to that greater cost.
And so, okay, thank you, Ms. Barajas, for describing that. And so from what I understand, based on the applicant's presentation, is originally they believed that that path of travel from the sidewalk was accessible, or there were, you know, maybe just a few, you know, minor modifications that needed to be made to that in order to make it fully compliant. However, once they, you know, started getting into it further, realized that no, that actually the slopes don't work, some of the cross slopes don't work, and it's a much larger, you know, it's much more involved than what they originally thought. And so in order to make it work, they'd have to provide this ramp from the sidewalk up to the, you know, directly up to the court, which is this additional $209,000 cost. Is that, Steve and Sam, is that correct? Am I describing that correctly?
Yeah, Board Hornbuckle, that's a good assessment. That's a good summary, is that we didn't realize that we had issues in the early stages. We were prepared to repave that and widen it to 4 feet, but that's all we thought we needed to do was repave it, maybe in a new color, maybe in a brick, maybe in something that met stormwater management. But we didn't realize that all the cross slopes and the steepness of that really threw us into a whole new design assignment, and the soft costs and hard costs of that, creating a new ramp to that southwest corner is what put us in the hardship mode. And after we did as much work as we did, this came late in the game, and unfortunately it's not achievable at this time.
I think I would add on to that the cost of the project outside of ADA, as you in the industry know, often happens, has far exceeded, unfortunately, what we have fundraised for twice. And that has also put a pinch on the school. And even getting drawings prepared isn't free either. So that as you know, Jeff, it costs money to get someone to be interested in doing that. And so although we aren't trying to hide the ball for sure, we would absolutely provide a sidewalk if that was something that was feasible or could be done, absolutely. But from the advice of our professionals in review of the situation, our civil engineer, it looked like the ramp was the only solution that was going to meet code. And we asked for an estimate, which I think is probably low now since it's over almost 2 years since it was done, given the amount of construction in Santa Barbara. I hope it isn't, but that's what we're faced with.
Board Member Hornbuckle, just want to add, in my experience, what I've seen in the past when requests like this have happened in a previous life of mine, I've seen these be successful. Typically what we would see is we would have a little more detail. We would have an actual elevations associated with what is there now. And, it doesn't have to be a full set of construction documents, but we've seen somewhat of a layout or sketch with those elevations, how the impact would be on having to either flatten that path of travel or elevate that path of travel or create those ramps with switchbacks or whatever need be. So typically we would see something more associated with it that ties the numbers with the cost. And in this case, we did not have that in order to really support those numbers.
To confirm that the 209,000 or whatever it was a actual cost. That was
the actual cost as well as the feasibility of the site based on the site conditions.
I see. Okay.
This is Board Member Kuntz one more time. I just want to point out that when I look at, even if we do have to bring a ramp up to the hard court, let's look at your ramps that you put in at point C and E and F. Those ramps are far more substantial than what we're talking about here. And yet you're presenting that the new ramp would cost twice as much as these much more substantial ramps.
This is Board Member Marston. I agree. I was out there also a week or so ago, and some of those ramps are very nice. And the cost for those ramps, which is much less than we're talking about here. So somehow I don't understand how, even if you put a ramp on that sidewalk that we're discussing, it's going to be anywhere near 209,000 compared to what you claim you spent on the other ramps. And I also want to point out that I thought that some of these estimates of the cost of construction were very questionable. And I noticed that some of the invoices had the guard rails. I think you call them guards or just guard rails when you have a 36-inch or 32-inch drop. Those were included as accessibility expenses. So there's a lot of things I think in what you're saying was what you've already spent on accessibility was not that. And just a side question, but on the bathroom, it said redoing bathrooms, stairways, and something else. So there was more in the bathroom cost than just the bathroom. So I would like to see, actually, if you're going to have any problems, was try to get out or let us know what really the accessibility cost was. But as I said before, I'm sorry to go on, but there's no rush on this. You guys can save money by not doing it now. And we can come back later with some good drawings showing us what the best way to do this is. I just wish we could get that sidewalk done. And I would strongly say I'm in favor of the sidewalk being repaved. And then if you really think there's a problem with the cross slopes, let's get a good estimate based on what you've sent for other ramps and let us know this and we can review this again. That would be my motion.
I would support that motion, and just to confirm for everyone, I'm going to defer to interim building official Dye and ask if I'm correct in my assumption that the appellant can extend their building permit in 6-month intervals indefinitely at no cost. I believe that's the current city policy.
Hello, Mr. Coons. Yes, they could do that. On application, they can ask for an extension, a one-time extension for 6 months. And I apologize, but I'm wondering why the adjusted construction cost or why the valuation changed and how it changed, and if the path of travel elements were part of the valuation. Because with this exception, you cannot include the cost of path of travel upgrades.
Yes, this is Marston again. Thank you for that, Interim Director. I do think there was a problem with putting in accessibility cost in with the construction cost or taking them away. Remember, every time you move a non-accessible amount and put it into accessibility, you've increased your accessibility spending and you've reduced your total cost of construction, which makes the percentages come out very bad. So I think there's some problems there, like I mentioned, the bathroom and the ramps that have the guardrails included as part of accessibility, which they're not.
I'd like to address that. This is Steve Welton. Any errors in that were solely my fault. I am not a certified access specialist. This is not my normal area of expertise. I did the best I could with the receipts that I had for the school and trying to parse through the invoices from Hanson and other persons that provided services to the school, and then try to put them into categories that seemed correct to me. So if I made errors, they certainly weren't intentional. And again, absolutely 100% not trying to hide the ball. That is not our credo. That's not Marymount. But if there's a mistake, it's my fault. It was purely a mistake. And regardless of that, whatever the numbers you move, it's still a significant amount of money has been spent on ADA improvements.
Mr. Chair, board members, it sounded like you were ready to consider a motion. Is that the case, or do you still have more questions or discussion?
I think maybe a little bit of discussion about what motion might be brought. I'm inclined to support the chief building official's determination that we should deny the hardship based on the grounds that we don't have adequate representation of expenditure or the engineering feat in front of us. That said, I might be open to discussion about a continuance to get that information before this board.
This is Marston. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh yeah, this is Chair Spieler. So I guess my question is the fact that an extra accessible parking spot is provided, is that not more desirable than to get this path of travel in compliance?
Well, this is Marston. As I said before, it's nice to have one extra spot, but if there's 3 people that need it, then it doesn't solve any problem at all. So yes, that was a nice little thing.
So my thing would be like, okay, probably 95% of the time that extra spot would be used before 3 people needed the spot on the street. So would it be better to have extra spot 95% of the time? Or, you know, it seems kind of like a reasonable solution to putting in a lot of money to this accessible path.
Chair Spieler, with all due respect, as the only wheelchair user in this discussion, I can tell you that on-street parking is usable and valuable to me.
Okay, is it more valuable to you than that extra parking spot in the parking area?
Probably, because at the point which this parking lot fills up, and then we start to overflow to the street, it's likely that both ADA spots will be taken, in my opinion, and to be able to use one of those 15 out on the street would be potentially critical for me.
Okay, well, thank you. I think you answered my question. So, but you would be using 2 spaces out in that street now versus, because you would not have the double space in the parking area. So that would be the trade-off.
This is
I'm not-
Marston again. Remember this, Mr. Spieler, the 2 spaces are already there. No one's talking about getting rid of one of them. So they've already put the 2 in. That's fine. But if they're used, then one would have to park on the street, and therefore the sidewalk is necessary. But I want to point out that this whole appeals was not about equivalent facilitation because of the 2 parking spots. It was about the hardship of building the sidewalk. And that's what we're here for, not whether this is facilitation.
Well, but the parking spaces play into that because there was a cost associated with installing that additional accessible stall and pathway.
Right.
As part of the original plan,
Correct.
which
But-
included this path of travel. So it's not an accommodation that is being offered in lieu of the path of travel to the public right of way. It was part of the plan all along. And now the suggestion that someone might take it back is it sounds like retribution for requiring we uphold the state building code to the path of travel to the public right of way.
I'm not hearing anybody saying that they want to take that parking space away. So,
Well,
Mr.
that's the
Chair.
implication by the suggestion that you and Chair Spieler are making.
No, that wasn't my intent. That wasn't my intent,
We
Mr.
want to
Kern.
take that space away. I'm sorry, Chair Spieler, but you're saying that I've made the notion that we want to take that space away?
It sounded to me like that was the implication that this was being offered, and if there was.
I'm sorry, but I did not say that. So please do not put words
Okay,
in my mouth.
It sounded to me like a trade-off negotiation.
That was not me.
Can I ask a question, just jumping into the thick of this? And this I don't have an answer for. When the school has an event, we're having parking in that lower, what do you call it? The lowest, lower campus field there. And you have parking there. When those street spaces are filled up and the on-site parking is filled up, is that when you open that additional parking, or is it open and people can park there at both times? And that's more of a question of how it's used. And where I'm going with this is, if that field is open, when you need a lot more parking, you will need accessible parking spaces in there, even since it's temporary, that may be the ability to put in more parking spaces there, so that again, we don't need that path of travel going to the street because there's 15 spaces there. Just a thought, and I don't know how it's being used.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. I appreciate that. And real quick, before we move on, I want to apologize to Chair Spieler and Board Member Hornbuckle. I did not mean to put words in your mouth, and I apologize for my misunderstanding.
Board member.
This is Marston. I just want to thank Ms. Kent for bringing that up, because I also had that question. Can anyone park there at any time? The answer has to be no, because that's where the kids play. So somehow someone decides, oh, now we're going to open the play fields and the kids have to go away. If, in fact, anyone could park there whenever they want to, then yes, you have to have some accessible parking spots in the play field, but that isn't what the school wants.
Mr. Chair and board members, yes, and Ms. Broderick is here too. She could probably answer this even better than I could, but in general, these are used for events where we do expect to have more people on site than we can provide accommodation for with the existing parking. In that situation, primarily the sports courts are used, the basketball court, you can call it, I say, 4 square courts. Those are opened up, the gates open, and then people are directed to park in there for those special event times.
Then
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Kent, aren't accessible spots then needed to be there even if it's temporary? Would they have to actually have a painted accessible spot?
They would need to have, and again, I don't know how many parking spaces would be there. But that would be the same lot as what's on the site there. So as soon as we hit more than 25, we'll need another accessible spot in there. Now
Okay.
that could be done with temporary taping or some kind of temporary signage, but yes, they would need to provide that.
So we already have two, so I don't think we would probably trip that, right, with for providing in the parking lot.
Do we
Mr.
have
Chair
any
and
sort of,
board members, I just wanted to just make a clarification. The California Building Code, Chapter 11B, requires that a accessible path of travel be provided to the right-of-way because of that sidewalk, and that's really the genesis of this request. It does allow for the hardship, and the hardship is defined in the building code, and certain elements that are defined that would constitute a hardship. It includes infeasibility, and that would also mean that there's technical infeasibility would apply to site elements. So just want to bring that up, that although equivalent facilitation is something to consider, the code, Chapter 11B, requires that the path of travel to the right-of-way be provided or a hardship be granted based on that definition of a hardship.
Does anyone have a problem if we have a first vote on upholding the building officials' denial of the hardship and see how that is?
I would be in favor of that.
Are you suggesting a straw vote or?
Well, we're supposed to bring up the motion, which is to uphold the building official.
That is a standing motion, correct?
Right.
I'm gonna park right behind where that guy's.
Mr. Chair, board members, you could make a motion if you like and vote on it. And if it doesn't pan out, you can also, based on findings, make another motion.
Right.
My understanding,
There's a standing
yeah.
motion. Right
yeah,
now.
that's, thank you, Mr. Dimas. That's,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kuntz. I was just going to confer with you and agree, just letting one know there is a standing motion.
Can we have the motion read back? I'm not clear on what it was.
The motion is to, let me get my notes here. The motion is to ratify the motion is to deny the request for ratification of hardship.
Isn't it to uphold the building official's motion?
Yes, the building official denied the ratification of hardship. Is that correct, Jose Barajas?
Yes, I might need some help here from John Doimus on the phrasing. Is this they're upholding our decision to deny ratification? I'm just wondering on the wording of the actual motion.
It's on, we have it on the screen, appeal of the decision. So the building department denied the ratification of hardship. So the board can either, the standing motion is for the board to accept the denial of the ratification of hardship by the chief building official for the accessible path of travel on Mission Ridge Road property. So that's the standing motion. So they can accept the decision to deny. If we don't have the votes for that, then the opposite would be they can deny with instructions, which would be preferable, and then or they can overturn. Then there'd be a new motion to overturn the building officials. But the standing motion right now is the decision to deny the ratification of hardship that was issued by the building official.
Thank you. Did that make sense, Mr. Chair, board members?
Yes, that makes sense.
So point of clarification, you had talked about a continuation. Is there movement in the potential of us bringing information that support the cost of the ramp? We have some sketches of the ramp, and we have more estimates that we can pull together to show how all of these configurations really do exceed costs that are reasonable. Would a continuation be part of this or part of the findings?
Mr. Chair and
Steve-
Board Member, sorry, go ahead, Board Member Hornbuckle.
Oh, no, go ahead. Mr. Rojas,
Yeah, this is
fine.
Chair Spieler. So my question is to Sam Mathis. So it sounds like you prefer to be able to go, come back and provide more accurate figures and solutions to the
Well,
accessible path.
Excuse me, Chair Spieler, but I think you'd put it up. I think I'd want to confer with the school officials and with consultant that we complete that. I'm throwing there as an option to make this as understandable as we can for you as a board.
So just to go back to Board Member Hornbuckle's question about a straw vote, you're suggesting that we unofficially vote to
No.
No?
I was just asking. It wasn't clear to me what if Mr. Morrison was asking for a straw vote or for an actual vote. I was just clarifying. Is all.
Got it. So I'm curious about other board members' appetite for a continuance. I'm not opposed, but I don't want to champion that effort. I'm inclined to support the building officials' decision here.
This is Board Member Marston. Let me just address Sam here for a minute. If, let's say, this is upheld, the denial, then you still have the right to come back and say, oh, here's some new plans, here's some new calculations of what really was spent, and you can still come back and, right? If we uphold the building official now, you can still, I would think, come back.
That's my question. Does it allow us to come back, or do we have to resubmit? We resubmit new information, but is it a whole new case? Are we being sent out the door and having come back without?
That would be up to the building department to answer that.
Mr. Chair, board members, you could take a vote, as you stated, to see whether you want to uphold our decision, or you could make a motion and bring some findings to direct the applicant and the building official, which are recommendations, and then continue this. John, I don't know if the board votes to uphold it, if they can come back and have to do a separate appeal, or would it be a continuation of this one?
Sure, Jose, members of the board, probably the easiest way is if there is an appetite to want more information before making a decision, it would be best to, the easiest way is it would be a continuance, because otherwise the applicant has two choices. They can appeal a decision to court. There isn't a mechanism to appeal to council. This is one of the few boards where doesn't even go to council, it goes to Superior Court if someone wants to challenge a decision. Or they would have to start at least all over, where at least if you want to give direction now for what you want the applicant, it's easier for them to hear what would be needed to work with the building official and come back with that information at the next hearing or the one right after.
I'm sorry, this is Chris Broderick, head of school. I had to get onto my phone to continue on with the meeting. I had to exit from being able to see this. Is it okay if I just ask for a question and maybe provide a comment?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
This is Chair Spieler. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm also a mother of two teenagers trying to navigate this afternoon's activities, and I apologize for my change of venue. What I would like to say is I would implore you to give us a continuance in any motion form that you would be able to do so. Right now, with the COVID restrictions, we cannot have visitors on campus. Every parking spot is assigned to an employee. We do not have events. When we do have events off campus in a normal, non-COVID related year, our faculty park, we park off campus or they carpool so that we have as many spots available to our community as possible, always providing accessibility at the top level that we can, certainly when we have like grandparents on campus and so forth. That being said, with the restrictions of not being able to actually host visitors on campus and more than 2 or 3 people, we don't have any work crews on campus. If we have an emergency, we usually have to go into remote learning. So it would be in my request at this time to be able to give us a continuance, to be able to have some discussion, figure out what needs to happen. Most of our construction work gets done over the summer when we don't have students on campus. And certainly with COVID restrictions of taking temperatures and managing adults on campus, it's a lot of extra effort to be able to do anything extra at this time. So that's I don't know how you work that into a motion, but I would ask that you consider a continuance to give us the time to be able to address this appropriately.
Okay, thank you. This is Chair Spieler. Would somebody like to make a motion? My vote would be to have a continuance on this item.
I believe we have to address the standing motion first.
We have to address the standing motion first, and then after that, if they bring a new motion with a second, and then if there's a continuance, my only suggestion for the board is to, in the motion, exactly specify what the board wants to see, new information, so when they come back, so that you're able to look over and address the concerns that you've raised today.
Thank you, Jose. So I will make a motion that we uphold the building officials' decision to deny this hardship.
I second.
Okay, I have a discussion before we vote. If we uphold the building officials' decision, does that still allow for a continuance? Oh, so I think we need to not uphold the.
Wait a minute. We've done this before. I want to hear from the council, and because we've done this in the past where we have to address the standing motion first, and then we can have another motion. And I'd like to.
Correct. Yes. You have to address the standing motion first, have a discussion on it, and vote on it. Recognize that if there's a vote on the standing motion, there is no continuance. There's an actual standing motion to uphold the denial from the building official. If you don't have the votes for that, then you can proceed on to someone recommending a new motion to issue continuance with a second, and the motion raising all the issues you want to see in the information continuance, which would be helpful for the applicants too, as well as the board crew here.
To be clear, we have to vote first against the building official to put that aside, and then have another motion for a continuance.
You're absolutely right, Commissioner, Board Member Coons, correct.
Thank you, sir.
Just to finish discussions, I would support continuing the item and providing the applicant team with clear direction on what we'd like to see. So
Chair Spieler here. So Jose, Ross, I was wondering if you could bring up on the screen the reasons why you denied the ratification of hardship, and we could look at those quick.
Yes. Maria, could you please go to page 2 of the staff report? I'm sorry, page 3. And then scroll down to item B. And items A through D are the reasons for denial.
So I think when we vote for a continuance, I would like to see the applicant address, items A through D in more detail.
Mr. Chair, board members, I believe if you make a motion to, on the standing motion, vote on it, then your next motion, you can ask him specifically what it is you want him to do, whether if the board chooses to have him address items A through D or other options as you discussed earlier throughout the conversation.
And to clarify, Jose is right, because right now, before you can even talk about other motions, it's like someone already proposed a motion when you have a standing motion. So you've got to move fast, take care of this one, and then go on. So it just to be helpful, it sounds like there seems to be an interest in a continuance. If that is the case, this motion needs to be denied. Go ahead, Commissioner.
One more quick point of clarification on procedure here. I'm concerned that a vote against the chief building official's standing motion then is a ratification of hardship, and that we could get stuck there with this being clear and no continuance stipulation. So how do you suggest we navigate those treacherous waters?
It's a good question.
Can we modify the motion? Can't the maker of the motion modify their motion?
I think this is what we should do. The motion should be upheld, is to uphold the building official's ratification of hardship. We vote on it, we vote, assume it doesn't pass the vote. Then we make another motion to direct the chief building official on what needs to be done.
This is Jim Marston. I have a question for Mr. Hornbuckle brought up, is this a straw vote or not? I would like to hear from the other two members to see what they think. Maybe we could call it a straw vote, because if we do vote to uphold the building official and it passes, then they have to start over again. So why don't we just have first a straw vote to see how this would go? And
I'd also like to hear council's thoughts at this time. He seems to have something.
I think two things. If you do straw votes, at least everyone knows where we're going to go. Number two, we do have a standing motion, but there is a sense that from everyone here after that you would be ratifying it. So in this case, the maker of the motion, the standing motion, there could be a modification. I think it's safe for the record, so everyone knows what exactly is transpiring. There's no prejudice or hardship on that if there's a modification, because in one sense, no one wants to either have if there's a desire for the straw vote of a continuance, no one wants to have a ratification or denial. So I'm okay with that. So I think the easiest, cleanest way to clean this up would be, and maybe in future cases we won't, we'll carefully word our standing motions, or at least make a recommendation. You know what? We'll make a recommendation. Then the board can take on the first motion, so there wouldn't be a standing perhaps of that. But we do the straw vote and then allow the board to make a modification to the standing motion, and then proceed. If there's a new desire for a new motion, let's say, for example, continuance, the board can do that. How does that sound?
That sounds good to me. I'm struggling with one of the same problems that the chief of school or head of school is struggling with. I have a hard stop in 15 minutes. I have a adolescent son that has to get to a school event, and so at the very least, I'll be switching to my phone, and I won't be able to see you all anymore in 15 minutes.
So, this is Chair Spila, John Domus. Can you give us an example of a motion that you think we might want to make right now? I'm a little confused on how we do this.
Do a straw vote, if there's a desire to do a straw vote to grant a continuance with the following information being presented or answered at the next hearing, and what you specifically want to see.
In addition to what's here on screen, A through D, I would like to see the elevation drawing detail for to go with the original construction plan of widening the sidewalk, as well as more detail on the $200 and something thousand ramp. I'd like to see those plans and understand that in context of the cost of all of the other ramp work that seems far more extensive and far less expensive.
This is Marston again. I still think there's a motion that we needed to vote on, but I would
Well,
like to
yeah,
hear
so
from
straw vote.
from the other two members to see what they have to say about this, what their feelings are.
Yeah, so let's
What-
get the straw
Right.
vote.
I have a question is, what is a straw vote?
Oh my God.
It's an unofficial vote.
It's exactly, it's an unofficial vote to gauge the temperature of the board on a potential action, but it does not become an actual action item, or nothing is resolved from that vote. So
So just trying to understand if everyone agrees that we should be working towards a continuance or not.
Yes.
This is Chair Spieler, I agree.
So let's have a straw vote on what you would vote if we wanted to uphold the building officials' denial. Just to check the temperature.
Okay. Okay, so Chair Spieler here. I'd like to take a straw vote on upholding the building officials' denial of ratification of hardship. All in favor, say aye. Jeff Hornbuckle.
No.
Nay. Okay, Nick Kuntz.
Aye.
John Maloney.
Nay.
Jim Marston.
Aye.
Paul Spieler. Nay. Okay, so 3-2, the straw vote fails.
Okay, then I want to present, well, Paul, you could probably put this in a good thing too, but I agree with you. We should ask them to do item B, the 4 items, and tell us more details there. I would like to get good detailed plans of what this supposedly $209,000, and if there's any other ways to do it with a little bit of a slope or a little bit of changing, or maybe having people come through the gates. And I would also like the people from the school to try to go over those invoices you have and make sure that you're not including a bunch of non-accessible stuff in the accessibility stuff, because I think that there's problems there and things have been moved from construction costs into accessibility costs. And I would like that to be looked at by the time we hear from you again.
I think that's that's number C of the item. It's not clear how the project's construction budget increased. So I think they need to provide a more accurate estimate that shows those details you just requested.
Okay, and
I think
A is not something we need them to come back to address. That's a given. We understand A. So I think that it really boils down to B, C, and D.
Let's add an E. I think Sam Mathis said maybe come up with a more of a schematic drawing, not an official drawing, but that would have the elevation changes for the ramp that would explain that a little bit better. And
hold on.
maybe
I think that there should be drawings to go along with this $209,000 bid that would provide those ramp elevations and everything. So I don't want to settle for a schematic when there's a bid and plans to go along with a bid. I would support seeing a schematic for the sidewalk scope of work without the extensive ramps.
In my opinion, I don't think we need, full working drawings on, this proposed ramp up to the corner. I would hate for the applicant team to have to spend a bunch of money on design work to, design a ramp that probably isn't going to get built. So if they can just provide, and this is for discussion, obviously, if they can just provide, enough information, to justify the cost information, that would be my, I would be supportive of that.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I had a different understanding. I assumed that there were drawings to go with that $209,000 bid.
There are now. We could get additional bids, maybe, if that would be helpful.
There are schematic drawings for that. There's not working drawings for that ramp.
Okay, but here's what I didn't understand. We never saw what kind of drawings that the Sam used to get the 209,000 estimate. So those have to be there, right?
we-
You have something.
We have something, but we did not present that. We do
Right,
have.
I know, but you
Mr.
can't get
Chair.
an estimate if you don't have any drawings to work on. So you must have something that shows how you came up with the 209,000.
That's
And I
right.
would
He's
like-
said it now several times. They've got schematic drawings of the ramp, which is
Mr.
what
Chair, sorry.
what the bid was based on. So what I'm saying is just for them to provide those schematic drawings that they've already got, that the bid was based on, rather than asking them to, fully design the ramp.
Yes, and this is Chair Spieler. I'm a structural engineer, so you can get a fairly accurate estimate off of schematic drawings. So that's why I suggested schematic drawings with some elevations that have some detail but aren't full working drawings.
Agreed.
Okay, I do this is Marston. I understand that, but now we're looking at what was already drawn up, and I think we have to have other people look at this, or Sam to look at it again and say, is there a better way to do this? Otherwise, we're just saying, okay, you have another period of time to look at the same exact drawings that you already based this estimate on in the first place, without any changes to it. So I would like someone to actually look and see what can we do better.
Okay, Jim, I think we can put a motion that satisfies that. I'd like to make a motion now to have a continuance on this ratification of hardship. And what the applicant needs to do is they need to come back and provide a response to items B, C, and D in the staff's report under paragraph B, and then also provide some schematic drawings with enough detail to show elevations and things necessary to provide a fairly accurate bid on, on the accessible path of travel compliance.
Can we ask for at least a second estimate? I'm just always have a problem with getting an estimate from one person, and then we have to just take that as gospel.
Board Member Markson, you as members of the board could ask for it and vote on it if you like.
Yeah.
My understanding of your motion as it stands right now, if I answer correctly, Chair Spieler, is for the applicant to address items B, C, and D, and adding item E, which would be providing schematic drawings with some spot elevations to justify the construction cost. And what appears to be up in the air right now is whether you request a second construction cost.
I'm still wanting to see the comparison of the two options, this ramp option versus what it would take to provide the original scope of work for the sidewalk.
Sam, is this something that you said you had? You had a couple schematics showing different options?
My office didn't do these options. The civil engineer, Mike Goins, has the drawings, and I will need to check with him. But we have an option that was the original curb changing and sidewalk alteration that was looked at as very expensive and reducing things that are very necessary for that parking lot and drop-off area. So we opted for option two. Option two, we do have drawings of a switchback ramp that we do have schematic drawings for, and we can get the dust off those and certainly bring those as part of this continuance for the comparison as the board member is looking to. So we can look at both of those in our next journey with you.
Sam, I just wanted to be a little more forceful with that first option because it showed, the sidewalk going into the path, into the drive aisles, and we just,
correct.
As a school, we just can't do that. So that's why it was not an option for us. I'd be happy to show you the slopes, which is what was asked for, and so we can provide the information that shows the cross slopes if you want verification of that. Just sounds like what you were asking for at the board.
I agree, Steve. That first option, just to try to clarify for the board member that's asking for the comparison, really did erode the function of the parking lot to a point where the tolerances of the lanes were narrower and the safety of those lanes became questionable. So we had to look at another option, and that's where the ramp option came in. We can bring some of that bold work, and we did, and we can show you how that all amounted to those changes.
Great. Are we ready to?
Chair and board, I would like to interject before another motion is made, and I apologize. I'm coming in late with this. Should have brought this up prior to the first motion, but I do not believe the applicant qualifies for this exception. The code does not say that if you're over the valuation threshold, that you can request hardship. And they are over the valuation threshold by a lot. So I don't believe they qualify for this exception at all.
Well, that is certainly compelling information. The former chief building official had a different interpretation of that. And I quite prefer your interpretation.
Well, I'm just looking at what the code says. The code says if they are at or under the valuation, which was $156,162 in this code cycle, that they could qualify for an unreasonable hardship. Above and beyond that, they're required to comply with path of travel. And there is a order in which they have to do that.
So why would you accept the application? In that case, if you don't qualify and we've spent a year and a half, you're trying to go through this process and spent lots of money more trying to get to this point, and now you're telling us at the end of the hearing that we don't qualify for the hardship. That's pretty frustrating to hear.
Ms. Dye, can I clarify this a little? Because it is my expertise. If you are spending under the valuation threshold, which increases every year, we're about 173,000 this year, give or take. At that time, it was less. You're required to spend 20%. You cannot go under it. You're required to spend 20% of the adjusted construction costs.
Correct.
When you go over that amount, you are still required to spend 20%. And in California, you're required to spend the whole path of travel to make it accessible. But about 6 years ago, California aligned themselves with ADA and said that you still have to spend 20% if you're over the valuation threshold, but you can apply for a hardship, if it is a hardship, not to spend the whole path of travel. And I think that's what's happening here, but that is the way it is. That's the way it's coming from the ADA. They are still required to spend 20%, and they've spent a lot more than that, but that's the requirement.
They have spent well beyond 20% of the 491 lowered valuation. However, that's not my interpretation of the California Building Code. It doesn't.
Agree to disagree on that one.
This is Board Mr. Marston. I believe Ms. Dye's, but we've had our straw vote and 3 people don't agree with that fact. And I'm sorry that they don't, but that's what the rules say. And I want to point out something else as far as if we have this new proposal coming back. They spent a lot of money on this bathroom, which I think part of it is not really the bathroom, but the stairs and stuff. But
hey, this is Chair Sealer. We've already been discussing this, Jim, and people have to go. So
this is something new.
People have to go.
Give me 1 minute. The bathroom itself was number 3 on the list of what you have to do for path of travel. So they spent the money on the bathroom at the expense of the path of travel. That's not correct hierarchy. Is that correct, Ms. Dye?
I'm sorry, but that code section reads, priority should be given to those elements. It doesn't say priority must be given to those elements. I just want to be clear about that.
If I may recommend it, so right now my role is at least to advise the board on this hearing. It seems there are some important issues, I think, for all parties involved here. There's some, decisions in terms of the interpretation of the code, how it's applied. The board has spent 2 hours on this, and then to rush and make a decision right now, you're being put in a little bit of a difficult situation. But my recommendation is to at least if you want to continue the item. There's right now a standing motion still. There could be no vote on it. You can continue this item for next hearing. I think maybe the applicants have been at least know from what the conversation of what the board wants to see, but there's also an interpretation issue. I think that both the city needs to present and their side should be allowed to address that issue as well. And this is something that you may want to consider. It's just, like I said, the board, of course, has complete purview of how they want to go about that. But I recognize some of the time issues. I recognize I can hear some of the stress from all sides. So it's just one point that we can consider.
Thank you very much. This is Marston. I thank you very much for that. I think maybe the best thing is just to ask for a continuance, get some of these questions answered at the next meeting, and then we can get into more detail. But I think it's time to just give a continuance and pick this up later with some more information.
Am I correct in understanding we don't need a vote we don't need to deal with the standing motion to get the continuance going?
We still have a standing motion, so you can have a vote to continue the meeting. And the first thing that can be taken on is the standing motion.
Okay.
That'd probably be the easiest thing.
I move for a continuance.
I'll second that as long as they come back with B, C, and D information.
Yeah, there's no contingencies here. We're just going to pick up where we left off next time.
Okay, I'll second the motion for a continuance.
Sorry.
Okay, we'll call for.
I thought Chair Spieler already made a motion.
Yep, and I'm interrupting that motion and asking for a continuance at this time. We'll pick up the standing motion when we reconvene.
Wasn't his motion for a continuance?
It was. Yeah, my motion was for a continuance with the applicant providing more information, addressing items B, C, and D.
We were struggling to come to an agreement on what we wanted to see in that motion. So that's why I want to continue this conversation.
Well, I think we need to give the applicant some direction, and we are still voting on it, so it can still be denied, but we're giving them some guidance. So I'd like to keep my motion. Do I have a second on the motion?
Okay, just so we're clear, the legal counsel is recommending that we not move forward, that we give the continuance and pick up this discussion later. So counsel wants to get.
My motion is to continue. Okay, let's hear from legal counsel. My motion is to continue.
You can do either, and I understand what Board Member Coons is saying in terms of just a general continuance. I also respect the idea of wanting to give direction to the applicant, but also our interim chief building official, Ms. Dye, also raised a different issue too at the end. So I think that may need to be addressed. So I'm trying to figure out the best way for this board to solve the situation with all these moving parts and information coming in, and I can understand the consternation from everybody. I think there's a motion right now in terms of continuance. You could, in the motion, provide helpfulness to the council. I think for the board really wants to get to the information they need it. They thirst for it. You guys everyone on the board has shown that. It's helpful to give direction of maybe what you want to see, but also what you want to see from the city too. There's an issue from the building official in terms of whether there's a qualification here too. So that would be a good motion to encompass all on what you'd want to see in continuance too, if you want to go that route. It'll help at least the board have a meaningful discussion. You spent 2 hours going on this, there's new information being thrown at you, and so I wanted to be fair for all sides, and that's what I'm trying to do here, try to make it fair for you to review everything and for all the applicants. So that's all.
As the applicant, I just have to say it would be much preferable to have some guidance on how to return, understanding that there is this issue of apparently re-reviewing whether or not we qualify for our hardship, but I would much prefer to have some guidance and know whether we're going down the right path or not before we spend more time and effort on pursuing a hardship.
This is Chair Spieler. So John Doimus, could we include in the motion that the first task of order would be for the building official to clarify whether a hardship can be granted in this case? And if so, then we would like to request a continuance as I had previously stated.
I think it'd be easier, Chair, to have it all in motion and ask individually. We'll continue it with the building official and along the other side too, because they may contest that. Number one is to see if an exception is allowable or not, and allow the other side to submit why they think it is or not, and the building official to submit why the exception doesn't apply. And then specifically from the applicants, you want to see, I think, B through D on what we see on the screen, and that's a fair motion to do so. And I would recommend potentially doing that, because I think that the board wants to hear all the issues and see and decide on that. So you don't want to miss anything, it sounds like, which is a great thing. So that's what I would recommend.
So you would recommend a motion that includes two items. One is the building official's clarification of the hardship if it applies in this case. And then secondly, okay. All right, I'm ready to revise the motion. So I'd like to make a motion that the chief building official look into if a hardship is applicable to this case, since the projected cost is above the evaluation threshold. And if it is, if the hardship can be granted, then I would like the applicant to come back and better address the items B, C, and D in the staff's report, and include an item E, which would be schematic drawings that are sufficient to provide fairly accurate estimates for the ramp and or improvements to the path of access travel from Mission Ridge Road, and with information on it, such as detailed information such as elevations and pathway widths, etc.
I'll second that motion. This is Hornbuckle.
Okay, so we will call for vote. All in favor, say aye. If you have a camera, please turn your camera on. All opposed, say nay. Jeff Hornbuckle.
Aye.
Nick Kuntz.
I'm sorry, because I switched to my mobile device. I didn't hear that entire motion.
Okay,
So
the motion is, okay, are you there now, Nick? I can repeat the motion. Hello, Nick?
I can't vote on a motion I didn't hear. Can you please repeat?
Yes, okay. So this is Chair Spieler. I make a motion that
My vehicle's moving,
request.
so connectivity's breaking.
Okay, my motion is that the chief building official look into the application of a hardship and see if it is if it applies in this case, since the valuation is over the threshold. And if a hardship can be granted, then I would like the applicant to provide more information. We'd like to request a continuance and have the applicant provide some detailed information that the building official said was lacking, items B, C, and D in the staff report. And I would like to add item E, which would be schematic drawings and accurate bids and for the ramp and the path of travel from Mission Ridge Road to the access point. And the drawing should provide detailed information such as elevation points and slope, cross slope, etc. Did that come through, Nick?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, great. So we'd like to call for vote.
We've already had
All
a
in
vote.
favor, say aye, and I'll say nay. So I'll go first with you, Nick Kuntz.
Hear me?
I'm, I didn't hear your vote. Aye, okay. Jeff Buckle,
Aye, again.
John Maloney,
Aye.
Jim Marston,
Aye.
Paul Spieler, aye. Motion passes. All right, now we need a motion from the board to adjourn. Then we will use roll call for the vote. Please use your cameras.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I will second that motion.
Call to vote. All in favor, say aye. All say nay. Jeff Hornbuckle,
Aye.
Nick Coots, John Maloney,
Aye.
Jim Marston,
Aye.
Paul Spieler, aye. Motion to adjourn carries. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for your time.